If you don't believe that there's effective progress happening, then it's not happening, because you are the one who gets to decide. So, who decides? You do, because you are the expert on your child. Now, how many of you, if you are parents of kids, feel that you have a really good sense of your child's strengths and weaknesses and learning style and needs? I won't say do you think you're an expert, but do you think you got a pretty good idea? Yeah? No hands are going up here. Woohoo! Got my work cut out for me. So, remember, you take it one step at a time. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. We're going to go through it one step at a time. And fortunately, you all have a roadmap. You have the roadmap to help you figure out where you're going, where your child is. By now, we're, round the bend, more ways than one here. We are almost to the end of this roadmap. So I'm going to assume, as I go through this presentation on effective progress, that you're pretty happy with the services that your child is getting, that you've got an IEP you can work with, that you've got services you can work with. If that's not the case, of course, you've got to go backwards on that road and get yourself the data that you need to figure out how to get better services for your child. But for tonight, we are going to talk about effective progress. And so we're going to, now that we've decided that you are the ones who make the decision, the next question is, what is effective progress? And the not very helpful answer is that it depends on who you ask. If you go to the Federation for Children with Special Needs and you go to their website and you look all the way through it, nowhere in there do they give you a definition of what effective progress is. So that's not particularly helpful. The federal government no longer says that it means maximum feasible progress. That used to be the standard, that the child was expected to make the maximum feasible progress. That is no longer part of either the federal or the state standard. But the government does say that it needs to be meaningful progress, it needs to be documented, it needs to be based on the child's individual learning profile, which is where having an evaluation that talks about your child's strengths and their potential and their learning style, that's really important because that helps determine what their individual learning profile is and what the potential is. And it can include non-academic needs. This is really important. Sometimes a child will be making appropriate progress academically, but they won't be doing well socially or emotionally or behaviorally. The law says that that does not constitute effective progress. If your child is doing okay academically, but is falling apart in other areas. So, my definition of effective progress means that a child is mastering as much of the curriculum as he or she possibly can in a given year. So there are some really important words in that sentence. And looks like I have a slide that says nothing. Okay. Mastery, curriculum, time frame, and potential. We're going to talk about each of those terms because that's how you figure out what effective progress is. Mastery is a big issue for me. I honestly care less about how challenging the curriculum is, and I care more about how much of the curriculum a child masters and remembers and is able to use. It doesn't matter if the 6th grade teacher is saying, I use a textbook in social studies that they use at Middlesex Community College, but half the kids don't understand what's going on and they can't follow it and they can't remember it, and if you ask them 2 days later, they have no idea what they've been taught. I care about whether the child understands what's being taught and can remember it and can use it. So this is important for all kids, but it's especially important for a child who has any kind of a learning difficulty. Those children learn at a different pace and often in a different way from an average learner. Regular education is designed for a regular learner, an average learner. So I'm not going to discuss whether I think that an average learner is mastering the curriculum or not. Some of them will and some of them won't. But for your child, if you have a child with special needs, your child will not master the curriculum unless the teaching style is a good match for their learning style. So there needs to be that good match, and if there isn't, then you got to go back on the roadmap and address the fact that there isn't a good match. So the whole idea is that you're looking for the right instruction provided by the right people that will allow your child to understand and remember and use the material that's being taught. That's mastery, and we all know it when we see it. So you want mastery of academic material and social skills and organizational skills. All of that is going to be more difficult for a child who has any kind of a learning problem. But it's one part of measuring effective progress. So the next one is curriculum. The next important term there is curriculum. What exactly are the skills or knowledge that an average learner is supposed to get in 3rd grade reading, or 5th grade math, or 6th grade social studies? So there's a curriculum for each grade level. I'm going to put the whole thing up there. There we go. Okay. Good. Okay. There's a curriculum for each grade level and for each subject area that will be taught at that grade level. It should be written down. You should be able to get a copy of it. Now, years ago, when my kids were in school, you'd think I wanted secrets from the CIA. I mean, I went and asked for the curriculum, and they gave me a very strange look. And honestly, it was really like prying secrets out of the government. Now, it's much more available. Most towns will have the curriculum either available on their website, or some teachers hand it out at the beginning of the year. This is really important. I mean, your child may not be mastering that whole curriculum, but it's essential that you know what the curriculum is, because that's what's going to let you compare what your child is learning with what the average learner is being taught, what they expect of that average learner. You can't measure effective progress if you don't know what your child's peers are expected to learn in the same amount of time. So your child may be working on different things. The IEP is going to tell you what those things are so that you can compare. Otherwise, you're never going to know if your child is catching up or treading water or falling behind. You won't know. I've tested children where the goals and the benchmarks did not change from one year to the next in the IEP. I've tested kids who made no progress in one or more areas, 2 or 3 years in a row, and the parents didn't know because, the IEP just kept saying the same things. So you have to know what the average child is being taught and what your child is supposed to be working on. If your child has some kind of a learning difficulty, the school may say to you, well, you can't compare them. You can't compare them with the average learner because your child has a learning problem. That's only true up to a point. It is true that your child will have their own set of goals and their own set of benchmarks for how to get there. But you have to also know what's being taught to the average learner, because the goal is to have your child catch up and get off an IEP. That's the whole point. is that the goal is to get your child off an IEP. So you've got to know where they've got to get to. Otherwise, you can't possibly compare. So you can't pretend that the average curriculum doesn't exist. And there we go. So at the other, you want to know what your own child's curriculum is in his or her areas of need. And so there will be goals and some indication of how much progress the school expects your child to make, what level they're at now, and where they should be at the end of that IEP. And if you're not clear on that when you look at the IEP, you need to ask questions until you get some concrete answers. And you really want some grade equivalence. Now, the schools treat grade equivalence the way they used to treat the curriculum. They would rather tell you their bank balance than tell you what your child's grade equivalent is. I mean, it's just this really closely guarded secret. For me, I really need to know that if I'm going to compare where your child is to the average learner. If they just tell me, you know, well, your child reads at a level N or a level 18 or something like that, this is not really helpful. And then if they tell me the child went from a level N to a level P, now I really have no idea. How many grade levels is that? Is that part of a grade level? Is it a whole grade level? I mean, in fact, I know what that is, but parents don't. You need to have, you know, does my child do math at grade level? If not, how far behind are they? And it needs to be a concrete answer. You know, I find grade levels to be, grade equivalence to be really important. And when I'm giving parents information, I'll give them the percentiles and the standard scores, but I'm going to give them a grade equivalent too so that they can compare. If grade levels weren't important, your child would enter school at age 5 and they would leave at age 18 and nothing that would be said about what grade level they were in. But that's not how it works. They take the curriculum for all of school, they divide it up into 12 chunks, and they present a certain amount every year. So it's perfectly reasonable to say, can my child do math at the same grade level that he's in? Can my child do research and organize a paper at the same level that he's in? So that way, you know how to make a comparison. To look at effective progress, you need to know what is expected, which is the curriculum, and what's expected of your child, which is in the IEP. You need to know that the right instruction and the right teachers are in place so your child can gain mastery. You need to know where your child starts and where he's supposed to end up. So the next point is the time frame. Most IEPs are written to last for a year. But what about if your child's IEP starts in November, or starts in February, or starts in May? It's really helpful to know where your child is performing at the beginning of the grade level. And sometimes that means that you'll need to go into school and you'll need to say, you know, I need you to do a review or a screening test in my child's area of need because I want to know where they're performing at the beginning of the school year. And it doesn't have to be a big involved thing. It doesn't have to take hours and hours and hours. The special ed teacher should be able to tell you and should be able to show you, I did this test and this is where your child is performing in September. You know, you may have to ask for a bunch of questions, but it's really important to figure out where they are at the beginning of the school year. Okay, there we go. Okay, the last one, the last issue in that definition of effective progress is potential. If the average child, the average learner, is given a curriculum that's a certain size, like a pie, and that's the whole, and your child has a learning issue, or a social issue, or an emotional issue, or a developmental problem, how much of that whole can you reasonably expect your child to learn in a year. You want them to get as much as possible, but not be frustrated. And teachers don't like to compare, but kids compare, and parents compare, and eventually, colleges compare. So you want to know where your child's potential is. Is this a child who is going to be able to catch up easily, or with great difficulty, or perhaps not at all? And you better figure it out. This is where an independent evaluation can sometimes be really helpful, because they will give you a sense not only of where your child is performing right now, but where they can reasonably be expected to get to in a year, or 2 years, or 3 years, so that you know where that potential is for your child. Some kids are going to make slower progress, they're going to make smaller gains because their learning disabilities are more significant. Or they have a really slow work pace, or they're really anxious, or they're really disorganized. But the point is, parents need to have some idea, and the independent evaluation is where you're most likely to get a complete and accurate picture of your child. So, alrighty, now that you know what effective progress is, how do you measure it? Remember, you are the one who ultimately decides. You're the one who knows your child best, you are your child's best advocate, and you're the one who's going to be taking responsibility to make sure your child gets the best possible education. The rest of us, we're just helpers. You're the ones. You are, what did George Bush used to say when Congress would, tell him to do all these things, and he'd say, yeah, but I'm the decider. So you guys are the deciders. You are the ones who decide whether that is effective progress or not. And to quote another president, when Ronald Reagan was dealing with the Soviets, he used to say, we trust, but we verify. And that is what you need to be doing. Trust, but verify. So there are 3 ways of measuring effective progress that I consider reasonable. There are school-based measures, home-based measures, and independent evaluations. So school-based measures come in many forms. And we're going to go through these. There's individual testing and group, which is often done at the beginning when a child is being qualified for an IEP. There's group testing done in school, state testing, teacher grades, progress reports, and progress testing. So individual testing done by the school is often done to qualify a child for services. Speech and language testing, academic tests, for reading, for phonics, for spelling, for written language, occupational therapy or physical therapy, psychological testing. We talked about psych testing, where you're looking at the child's cognitive strengths and weaknesses and their learning style. So that is individual testing done by the school. There's also group testing that will be done in some school systems. There's a group test called GRADE, and I actually don't know what the letters stand for, but it is given in some school systems for reading and for math at the beginning of the year. There's Stanford reading and math tests that are given on a group basis. Catholic schools use something called Terra Nova. So in many school systems, they'll give some kind of a group test to the whole class at the beginning of the year to see where they're performing. There's good old MCAS. And when I made up these slides a couple months ago, they hadn't started doing PARCC yet. So now there's PARCC testing, which is going to take the place of MCAS. These are statewide. They are achievement tests. They're designed to see whether your child has made an expected amount of progress in a year. They are not always the most reliable measure of your child's growth or your child's skill level for a variety of reasons. But They do give you, if your child is in 6th grade and you look at their 3rd and 4th and 5th and 6th grade MCAS and the scores keep going down, well, that tells you something. Or if they go up for a year and then go down, tells you something else. So it's not that there's no information there, it's just that I think that for the amount of information you get, it takes way too much time. You know, I could test everybody in the school system in less time than it takes them to do MCAS. So there are teacher grades and evaluations. You know, letter grades, grading on individual assignments. These are often difficult to compare because some classes are very objective, like science. You either know the answer or you don't. And others are much more subjective, like language arts, where they want you to compare and contrast 2 books or 2 short stories or 2 poems. And it's based on the teacher's assessment of how well you've answered that question. And not all teachers grade the same. Not all teachers teach the same. It's not an exact science. So teacher grades are often less helpful than I would like them to be. I mean, I've seen kids who read 3 years below grade level, and the parents bring in the report card and the kid's on the honor roll. And I'm thinking, how does this work? How is this possible? So I tell parents, I said, you know, it's like Fantasyland. Report cards can say anything. You know, I don't consider them to be objective measures of how well your child is doing. But they are one way of giving you a broad sense of whether your child's mastering the curriculum or struggling. If your child is on an IEP, you're going to be getting progress reports. Problem with progress reports is that the special educators are trying to squeeze these things in addition to doing all of their services and all of their testing and going to all the meetings that they're doing, they're also trying to write progress notes. And when I worked in a school system, I watched teachers and myself try to squeeze these things in and write them, and the end result is that they all tend to sound very much alike, and they don't end up providing as much information as I would like them to. I have very rarely seen a progress report that said the child wasn't making progress toward their goals. I think I've seen that, you know, twice in 32 years, and I just about, you know, dropped my teeth. They again are subjective because they don't include updated testing. Now, there may be progress testing, but this is often done at the end of an IEP period, and it may only be done during a 3-year reevaluation. If you have a child with a significant learning problem, or a child who's you know, really young, 3 years is a very long period of time. You really want to know what's going on sooner than every 3 years. A lot can go wrong in 3 years. You know, there are remedial programs that include progress testing as part of the instruction. If your child is getting Lexia, or Wilson reading, or Symphony Math, or one of the Lindenwood phonics programs, there are regular, standardized tests that the special educator will give that will tell you how much progress your child has made and whether they're retaining the information. So that is all more objective and somewhat more helpful. So the next way to measure effective progress is through home-based measures. And parents may feel as though there isn't a whole lot that they can tell about, you know, how to monitor their child's progress, but there really is. If your child is being helped in school, you should see something changing at home. You should see a difference at home. If your child is getting speech and language services, they're getting it because their language skills are below where they should be for their age and their grade. You should see some kind of an improvement. You should see better vocabulary, clearer speech, more complicated speech, better conversations. You should see your child volunteering to share information more verbally. If they're getting occupational therapy, you should be seeing better letter formation, a more adequate pencil grip, and you should also see an improvement in how they look at things. Can they do puzzles better? Can they do things like mazes and dot-to-dots and other kinds of things that take eye-hand coordination? Same with physical therapy. What's their eye-foot coordination like? What's their balance? What's their ability to play a sport? No matter what area your child is getting help in, you should see an improvement over time, and you should see it at home. This is where, you use the whiteboard, you post the goals from the IEP, you talk with your child about what those goals are. And the ones you post on the board should be the same as the ones that are in the IEP, so that your child is working at home to practice what they're doing in school. And you set up that schedule and you help your child practice the skills. Parents can tell how things are going in school by looking at their child's energy level, their mood, their social skills, and other things. If your child comes home and is completely fried at the end of the day and has no energy left to do anything, then something's not going well in school. There's effective progress is not being made if your child comes home and is tearful or exhausted or has absolutely no energy to do anything or is just in a totally crummy mood every day. There's something that's not working well. So, if your child are kids calling for a play date? Is your child calling to go someplace else? If they have no energy for social stuff, if they have no energy to play a sport, if you're finding that they're having trouble going to sleep, all of those things tell you that something's not going well in school on a day-to-day basis. The skills should be showing up, and they should be handling the after-school time reasonably well. I have parents who tell me that when the homework comes out, their kid starts to cry, or that their child cries in the morning and doesn't want to go to school. Those are red flags that something's not working. Children will improve most, as I said before, when they know exactly what to do and they're able to do it. And that's where the whiteboard and the practicing helps. You can ask your child about his day. Did he get the help that he's supposed to get on his schedule? When parents ask that question, they sometimes find out that their child is only getting their services half as often as they should be getting them. That, the teacher's absent, or there was a meeting, or there was something else that happened, and instead of getting, 3 sessions a week, they're only getting 1 or 2. So you should be asking your child whether or not they saw Mrs. So-and-so for reading today, or whether they saw Mrs. So-and-so for math. There's lots of research. One thing that I read was a study from Bill Gates' Educational Foundation, and they've spent billions of dollars trying to figure out what makes a classroom work. And one of the research studies I read said that they had found that 2 questions that they could ask a child, 2 questions would tell whether or not this was an effective classroom. And the one question was, does your teacher make good use of class time? And the second question was, when you're confused, does your teacher help you get straightened out? 2 questions. And the kids who answered yes to those questions consistently were the kids who were making the best progress. So it really tells you that your child should feel as though he understands what's going on most of the time, what's expected of him, and what's being taught and how to do it most of the time. If they don't understand what's going on, if they can't remember it, If they can't tell you what they learned in school, that's not effective progress. So the third way of figuring out whether your child is making effective progress is through an independent evaluation, which we have talked about. They can be scheduled as often as needed to monitor progress. They are using instruments that are nationally normed, and they're given independently, and they're given, in a way such that the child really has to do all of the work himself or herself. And that's really important. There's plenty of times in school where kids get more help than they should be getting. They may even get told to kind of check that answer or, change that answer. So you're not always going to get a fully objective picture. And you're also going to get an evaluation that covers all the necessary areas and can help you advocate for your child's needs. There are kids that I follow from when they're in elementary school until they go off to college. And sometimes I see them every year for a couple of years until things are going well, every 2 years. And so I have a real way of measuring whether that child is making effective progress or not. I can tell the parents where the child has improved and the areas where he or she has not improved. So, it also gives you data that you can compare with the school's testing. Data from the outside eval and the school eval should pretty much match. And if it doesn't, the parents need to ask why. Because it should. So, what if you have concerns about your child's progress? What do you do if you think your child is not making progress? Remember that you're the decider and that no one cares as much about your child as you do. Teachers may have good intentions, they may be skilled, but it's your child. So parents decide, they should see growth, and if not, we're going to talk about this, they need to work to change the amount or the type of help that their child receives. It's the opposite of what they tell you on the T. On the T they say, if you see something, say something. If you see something that doesn't seem right, say something. When you're talking about effective progress, if you don't see something, you should say something. So, here we go. We've got our triangle of communication again. Your child should be able to tell you what part of his day works, what parts of his day are not working, where he's confused, who helps, who doesn't help. You start by talking to your child, and you have to believe them, even if that's hard. Your kids are the ones who are doing the heavy lifting, and they have the least power of anybody. They can't vote, they can't quit, they can't avoid it, they often have to fake it even if they don't know what the heck is going on. So the first thing you do is you talk to your child and find out where they are confused, what parts of their day work, what parts of their day are not working. Because they will tell you, and they will be honest. The next step is to set up an appointment with your child's primary teacher or special educator. You start with the teacher who provides the most important services. If your child spends most of his or her day in the regular classroom, that's going to be the regular ed teacher. If they are getting reading services every day, then you may want to start with the reading teacher, because that's where you need to know that the effective progress is happening. You have to be specific about what skills you're concerned about, what skills you don't think are improving. And if possible, you make a plan to improve those skills. What can the teacher do? What can you do? And what can your child do? Now, you have to be honest, because you may already be doing as much as you can do. Your child may already be doing as much as he or she can do. So you ask that question and you and the teacher may brainstorm, but there may not be a good answer. Your child may simply need more help than he or she is getting. So you can set up a date for a follow-up meeting. You can request additional testing from the school. You can ask for an additional reading test or an additional math test if that's the area where things are confused. You can schedule an independent evaluation, and you can reconvene the team to talk about changes. You and the school theoretically have the same goal, which is getting your child off an IEP. You may have to remind them of this on a regular basis, but theoretically you have the same goal. But it may be that your child needs more help, and the whole point is that if they have the skills and the strategies, they will have less need for special ed services, which is what you're looking for. There may be limits in the school system due to finances, due to personnel. Those are not your problem, and they're not your child's problem. That's the school's issue. Your goal is to get your child enough of what your child needs so that your child makes effective progress. So in other sessions and in my book, I talk about the importance of communication. The communication notebook or some kind of communication system between you and the school helps you keep track of the practice that you're doing, that your child is doing at home, and that you're doing with your child, so that you let the teacher know what's being practiced, the progress your child's making at home, and the progress they may see in school, feedback from the school, and feedback from your child. I don't have a problem if parents do this by email, but it's got to be backed up someplace so that you can print the whole thing out if necessary. A couple of weeks ago I had a child come in for testing. He is already in a special ed school, and he did really well for the first couple of years. This year he moved from the lower school to the middle school, and they increased the speed and the complexity, and the child is not able to keep up. His learning disability is getting better, but it's getting better slowly, and he is an incredibly slow worker. I was like, oh my gosh, took us 30% longer than average to finish the testing. But the mom came in with a stack of emails that she had printed out that went back and forth between home and school and home and school. Patrick came home, and when the homework came out, he fell apart. And the teacher saying, okay, I'm sorry, we'll organize him a little bit better. And then 3 days later, it's still not simple enough. He still doesn't know what to do. He's still overwhelmed when he gets home. So she has a record of all of this back and forth so that when we all meet, we can talk about the fact that whatever they've done up to, since September hasn't been enough for this child to feel successful and to be able to continue learning and be in a good mood when he gets home. He's making effective progress academically, but the school has raised the bar too high in a couple of areas, and they're going to have to back it down because he's having a tough time. But if you're going to use email for communication, make sure it gets backed up, make sure you keep a copy. You print it out and put it in a folder. So, bottom line, if you want effective progress, you've got to keep your eyes on the prize and keep your goals and objectives in mind. Make sure your child consistently gets the services that you agreed to in the IEP. Monitor your child's growth. It's the school's job to improve your child's skills, but it's going to be your responsibility to make sure that they're giving your child what he or she needs so that he can show effective progress. And with that, if you don't see that progress, you need to say something and do something. So without effective monitoring, there probably won't be effective progress. And you folks are the deciders. So I am hopeful that you will all do what your kids need so that they can make that effective progress that you want for them. And I wish you all good luck.